It's Okay Not to Be Okay, but I Promise I'm Trying by rayrae118. Chapter 24. The start of the semester came as a relief to most in Gryffindor Tower. The week between Christmas and New Year's had been fraught with tension, as the Golden Trio was once more at odds. Ron had sulked around the tower, while Harry and Hermione spent most of their time with Neville and Ginny in the common room or the DA lounge. In the lounge, they were joined by many members of the group, the older of whom knew what was going on with Ron and supported Harry and Hermione completely. Most of them had heard at least some of the youngest Weasley male's comments. Somewhat of a surprise was the inclusion of Victor. He had asked Harry if he could join them that day, since he had very little homework and wanted to spend some more time in Hogwarts getting to know his new friends. After all, that's what the whole tournament was about. Harry mentally grinned at that statement, reminded of Hermione's reasoning to accept the date with Victor in the first place. Not much studying took place in the lounge, other than the 5th and 7th years. Harry was even able to convince Hermione to lay aside the books for a few days. Instead, they just spent time together and talking, playing games. Gobstones and Exploding Snap were the most popular, though there were a few chess matches as well. The pairings were significantly more even whenever Ron played with someone. The tenseness had culminated in one major blowout in the common room on New Year's Eve, where Hermione had yelled at Ron that if he hadn't liked her date, he should have asked her out before anyone else had the chance. Ron hadn't had a response to that, and after a moment Hermione had run up to the girls' dorms. Ginny had given Harry's hand a squeeze before she followed her friend. Harry had led Ron up to their own dorm, seeing all of their roommates in the common room at that time. A quick glance at Neville confirmed he would keep Dean and Seamus from interrupting. Once in their dorm room, Harry locked the door and faced his friend. He took a moment to make sure that when he spoke it would be calm and collected. Ron, you're my best mate. But if you don't start thinking before you speak, we're going to have some serious problems. Ron opened his mouth to talk, but Harry held up one hand, shaking his head. Ron, you grew up in a very protected environment. You learned early on that Slytherins were bad and Gryffindors were good. You see the world in black and white, and while that's not necessarily bad, the world doesn't really work that way. Everyone has shades of grey, even you. I'm glad that you've managed to keep yourself in check at DA meetings around the Slytherins, but you really haven't made an effort to include them or talk with them. Not everyone in that house is a Malfoy. Ron didn't try to speak this time. His face was turning red, but he seemed to be listening to what his friend was saying. Harry sighed. Ron, Victor is a good friend. Hermione's right. The whole point of this tournament was to foster international cooperation. It's all about making new friends. So let's talk on what's really bothering you. He sat down on his bed and gestured for Ron to sit down as well. He did so, looking decidedly uncomfortable. Why didn't you ask Hermione to the ball? Ron's head jerked and he adopted a deer in headlights expression. What? He trailed off, so Harry leaned forward. Ron, it's plain as day to everyone except the two of you. You fancy Hermione. So why didn't you ask her? Ron looked down, thinking. But finally, he spoke up, his voice quiet and contemplative. I wasn't sure how. I mean, you asked Ginny in this elaborate gesture, and Neville asked Susan, and I just didn't know what to do. I like her, Harry. A lot. But now she's with Crumb. Harry shook his head. She's not, he disagreed. What? Ron looked up, confused. She's not, Harry repeated. She and Victor went as friends. Nothing more. Ron frowned. Are you sure? Harry nodded. Positive. Ron looked slightly happier at that knowledge, but he still had a problem. So, what should I do now? I've really made a mess of things. Harry shifted in his seat, leaning back a little. I can't tell you what to do, Ron. Hermione's mad. But it's no more than you deserve. At least you realise that. Try apologising and then showing her with actions that you're interested. Ron bit his lip. What if she doesn't feel the same way? He asked worriedly. Harry snorted. Ron, did you or did you not hear her tell the entire common room that you should have asked her out first? She likes you too, mate. Harry decided to leave his friend to his thoughts and left the room to spend some more time with his girlfriend. Other than Ron and Hermione's continuing coldness towards each other, the only other point of interest during the holidays was an article in the Daily Prophet that appeared 2 days after Christmas. Hagrid was refusing to leave his hut after the newspaper had identified him as part giant, and Harry and his friends were hard-pressed to make him feel better. Even Ron and Hermione were able and willing to spend time with the others' presents in order to cheer him up. The comments from Malfoy and his cronies didn't help the situation, but Harry just ignored him, knowing that the Slytherin was losing power within his house, and his way of degrading others was just a last-ditch attempt to make himself look better. Hagrid was even cajoled into leaving his hut by the first day of the new term. He was relieved to see that the majority of the students didn't care about his heritage. The semester began, and Ron still hadn't spoken to Hermione. The tension in Gryffindor Tower was starting to become stifling, and even Minerva had picked up on it during classes. She asked Harry to stay after class to talk about it, but didn't receive much in the way of answers. From what she had gathered, Ron and Hermione were having another one of their arguments, though this one seemed to have lasted much longer than most. She wondered if it had anything to do with Ron's blow-up at the Yule Ball. She had told Harry how impressed she was by the way he had handled his friend that night. Ron finally asked Hermione for a word after the next DA meeting. With so many students attending now, Minerva and Phineas had worked their magic to enlarge the room, and Harry had decided that they needed to split up the students differently. He and the other leaders had met once after Christmas to plan and reorganise. The professors would take the 5th and 7th year students, and Cedric and Cho would handle the 6th years. Years 4 and below would continue to be split up into multiple groups, and would be led by Harry, Ron, Hermione, Neville, Ginny, Luna, Susan, Daphne, and Blaise. Blaise and Luna were officially dating now, as were Neville and Susan. Harry was happy for all his friends, though he did worry about how Blaise would be treated by the rest of his house. His worries were only cast aside when Blaise told him quietly that the only ones he needed to worry about were Malfoy, Warrington, and Montague, as Crabbe, Goyle, and Parkinsons were really just sycophants, following Malfoy like little lapdogs, and the rest of the house was either neutral or on his side, and actively watching his back. At the end of the meeting, Ron held Hermione back, appearing much more nervous than any of them could ever remember him looking. Harry gave his friend a nod and grasped Ginny's hand, leading the remaining students out of the room. Once they were alone, Ron cleared his throat. He didn't know where to start, but he knew what he needed to say. Hermione, I'm sorry. Hermione stared at him, waiting for him to continue. Ron coughed. I know I've been a real prat lately. You didn't deserve that. Neither did Crumb. I shouldn't have said what I did. So, why did you? Hermione asked, her tone giving nothing away. Ron sighed. Because I was jealous, he admitted. A ghost of a smile crossed Hermione's face, but the redhead didn't see it. I wanted to ask you to the ball myself, but I just couldn't work up the nerve to do it. And then you were already going on with someone else. Hermione sat down at the table, sighing. What is it exactly what you want to happen here, Ron? Ron sat down, moving the chair slightly so he was facing Hermione. I'm not like Harry, Hermione. I'm not good with words or actions. I don't really know to show how I feel. I like you a lot, but I really don't know how to say it. The smile this time wasn't fleeting. Hermione leaned forward, grasping one of his hands in hers. I think you just did, she said nervously. Ron looked up at their entwined hands and then up at her face. He saw the happiness in her eyes, and he smiled a little hesitantly. Hermione, would you like to go to Hogsmeade with me? Hermione nodded, beaming. I'd love to, Ron. They stood up and looked at each other awkwardly before deciding to make their way up to Gryffindor Tower before curfew. It wasn't quite as romantic or easy as Harry and Ginny, but Ron felt he could learn to be that way with time. After leaving the DA lounge, Harry and Ginny said goodbye to the rest of their friends as Harry led his girlfriend in a different direction. "Harry, where are we going?" Ginny asked mentally as he led her along. Since Christmas, the two had been experimenting with this mind speak, trying to find the limits. It took a bit more effort when they were further apart, and it was easiest to do when they were touching. They had noticed it was getting easier with time, though, leading Harry to come to the conclusion it was like any muscle. Exercise and practice would make it stronger. Harry gave her a mental smile. "It's a surprise," he replied, coming to the top of the 7th floor corridor by a portrait of Barnabas the Barmy. Ginny looked around, confused. Harry paced back and forth 3 times. She gasped in shock as a door appeared. Harry once more took her hand and pulled her into the room that had magically shown itself, closing the door behind them. It was a cosy room, with a fireplace dancing merrily in the corner, and a very comfortable-looking sofa. Windows that she knew must be artificial showed a silvery moon and millions of stars that would ordinarily be washed out from the light of the castle. Harry led her to the couch, sitting down and pulling her close to him. They snuggled for a few minutes as Harry explained. "It's called the Room of Requirement. Dobby showed it to me a few days ago. Apparently it stays hidden unless it's needed, and can become any room that you want it to. I was thinking we might move our morning run in here, since it's getting rather cold outside." Ginny snorted lightly, remembering their rather ill-fated run last week. Their runs over the last few weeks hadn't been as easy or vigorous as they had been before the snow had started to stick to the ground. As the pair of them had discovered, not slipping in 4 inches of snow and ice was not quite as easy as they had thought. "So, what else can this room do?" she asked, snuggling even closer. Harry smiled mischievously, pulling her up off the couch and holding out her hand. He closed his eyes, visualizing, and both felt and heard Ginny gasp as the scene around them changed. Where it had been a cosy study was now an outdoor scene. He opened his eyes and studied his beautiful girlfriend by the light of the artificial setting sun. He bent down to take off his shoes, and Ginny followed his actions, slightly dazed. "Harry!" She trailed off, looking around her in amazement. They were standing on a beach, and without shoes and socks, they could feel the sand between their toes. The sun was setting over an ocean. Ginny looked at Harry. "Is this real?" she asked curiously, gesturing to the water. Harry smiled. "Let's go and find out," he suggested, leading her up to the water's edge, close enough that the receding waves did not leave them dry. It was indeed real water, and Ginny sighed in contentment. She had always loved the water. Even living on an island, she had very rarely seen the ocean, and she was immediately enraptured. The two spent another hour walking in the surf, talking through their bond. The sunset remained just as amazingly stunning, casting orange and red hues across the water, sand, and the 2 people on the beach. Harry realised it was getting late and silently asked the room to go back to the study, and a moment later they were once more standing in front of the fireplace. Their abandoned shoes and socks were waiting next to the couch. As they sat down to shoulder their feet once more, Ginny smiled. "That was amazing, Harry. Thank you so much," from the bond. Harry blushed a little but returned the smile. "I had fun too, Gin. I've never seen the ocean before, but it was so beautiful, just like you." Ginny's face took on a pink hue, but she kept smiling. "I'd like to do this again sometime." Harry nodded, standing up and holding out his hand. I think I'd like that too, Gin." End of Chapter 24, Part 1. Hi guys! Welcome back to my channel. Remember to like, comment and subscribe, and I hope you enjoyed this. Ron is finally growing up, yay! And a beautiful little date with Harry and Ginny. That's a really creative way to use a room of requirement. Have a good day, night, or whatever time zone you're in. Bye, my guys, gals, and non-binary pals. See you in part 2. Bye!